Hello and welcome back to Politigood. My name is Rachel Parker.
And I'm Tim Fullerton.
Tim, happy New Year, I guess.
2025 is here.
Oh.
Yay.
I love that this week, so I live in the Midwest, and we got hit with that polar vortex, and I watched a fire truck get stuck outside of my house yesterday, and that just feels like, yeah, here we are. We are in 2025, where fire trucks get stuck in the snow in the Midwest.
Yeah, we've also already had an exploding Cybertruck outside of Trump Tower, which also seems very indicative of what 2025 is going to be. But anyways,
yeah. Well, here we are. Thanks for coming back. Thanks for not vanishing. Thanks for not disappearing. I heard a podcaster I really like say about podcasts that a lot of people start them and then very few people continue them because as soon as they do, they realize what a marathon it is. So how are you feeling into our little marathon so far?
I'm great. I mean, it's been really interesting. It is a lot of work for sure. Yeah. But the reaction has been so great. Like, we've got only 5-star reviews on iTunes, or Apple Podcast, which is great. And, I think people are just need something positive to talk about or to listen to. And I think that we're sort of filling that need for some people.
So let's dive into our guest this week. So you had some very strong opinions about the we'll say the left and the party, really the Democratic Party, getting involved and bringing their funders in, their big funders, their Katzenbergy types, their big bundlers, involved in funding we'll say like an influencer network for the center left and far left. And I was like, I need to understand how that would work, but it always falls apart in my brain because the reason the right can do that is because they have venal anti-democratic billionaires like Peter Thiel and Americans for Prosperity and Elon Musk and so on and so forth. And so today, we just recorded the interview, so I know what it's going to entail, but we spoke with someone who I'm going to say changed my mind. My mind was changed today. I am a believer. So talk a little bit about who we talked to today and what the project is.
Yeah, so his name is Josh Cook. He is the president of an organization called Good Influence, and he's also an advisor for something called Chorus, which was the whole point of the conversation, which is a new influencer-led organization to better coordinate messaging and tactics for influencers in the center left to the left, which is something we've never had before. And a bunch of pretty prominent influencers have gotten together and are working with Josh to stand this up, to be an entity, to not only help coordinate messaging, which is really important, but also to help eventually provide support with editors and potentially people offering healthcare plans and doing payroll and stuff like that. That's really hard for influencers to manage on their own. And so this was just announced last month. There was a lot of buzz around the announcement, and then we just dug in a little bit with him on what this is going to look like, and it all sounds really exciting.
Yeah, it's a really cool conversation. I can't wait for people to check it out. And I just want to say, like, you and I got the same khaki oatmeal memo today. Tim and I are both just awash in white hair and neutral tones this morning.
We're earth tones, like Al Gore used to say, right?
That's right. So anyway, I'm really excited for folks to listen. And without any further ado, here is our interview with Josh.
Hey, everybody, and welcome back to Politigood. We've got a really, really exciting guest today, Josh Cook, who is a advisor to a new influencer group called Chorus, and also the president of Better Influence, I believe. Josh?
Good Influence.
Good Influence. I am so sorry. This is what happens when I don't look at my phone when I do introductions. So Josh has been in the space for a long time. I want to give him just a second to introduce himself a little bit further, and then we're going to dive into influencers in Democratic politics.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's great to be here. Big fan of the show. Early listener, first time caller.
Thank you.
No, I'm Josh Cook. I'm the president of Good Influence. We're a influencer network and technology company. We work primarily with news and issue focused creators, and that work led us to be involved in the founding of Chorus, which I'm happy to talk all about, but is really creator led. So really, I'm just here to help get them off the ground and just build the structure that can support them. So great
That's
to be
great.
here.
Great. Well, it's great having you. And, I think we're going to just dive right into it. So one of the big things after the election in November, which was obviously a massive disappointment for everybody on this call and also who's listening, one of the biggest things that we have been talking about is how the messaging apparatus for the Democrats in general, the Democratic Party, is broken. And one of those areas in which, I think we saw the Trump campaign and Republicans actually excel at in this election cycle was their use of what, we're calling non-traditional media, which is soon going to be traditional media. And one of those was the use of engaging with influencers to get their message out. So, Josh, I'd love to hear a little bit about your perspective about how they excelled at that, and then we can kind of dive into the starting of Chorus and what is hopefully the building blocks of something really, really great.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, look, I think this is one of those things where there's sort of two tracks, and it's easy to be negative when you lose, right? When we win, we're geniuses. When we lose, everything we did is garbage, and how dare we ever talk about it again? And we bury it away, which is insane. But I think when you take a step back and just sort of say, how did we campaign? How did we talk to voters? How did we, it used to be knocking doors and all these pieces. Now it's so much more complex just in terms of the way that you have to reach people. One of the strategic advantages that I think the other side has well beyond this cycle, and you can take this back depending on how much of a history buff you are, but just go back 20 years, to Rush Limbaugh and AM radio. There's a reason that conservatives play not on FM, maybe they do now, but on AM. It's a different audience. It's a place where they felt like they could tell their story uninterrupted without fears and concerns about, brand safety is not the right word, but it's just a place that was made for them because they didn't feel like they had a place maybe in more of the mainstream cultures. So there's an entire sort of mentality of we should always be embracing newer media spaces and platforms and creating our own when it comes to the right. And the left, I don't think we always have that. We've tried it, usually in response to an ass kicking electorally or some other moment, right? We're I think all of an age where we can cite Air America and our attempts into cable. Those things are definitely things that I think you can look at and learn from. But we still, as a party, felt like we had safe spaces that reached a lot of people that were more traditional. And traditional is everything from cable news to print, all these places that I think we still ingest the content of as, at least some of the folks who in the past have voted Democratic. And so we appreciated them differently. If you are on the right, just think about today I don't want to mess up your date timestamps, but we're recording on January 6th. And from, right after the election in 2020 on, and especially on January 6th, you saw a rise in Republican right-leaning social platforms because of what happened on January 6th. And we said, oh, this is good. We're cleaning up these mainstream places. But what was actually happening was they were starting to foment and sort of put gas to the fire on building their own ecosystem, their own places where they could engage their audience 24/7. And I think we didn't really get to watch that happen and understand the impact it had on a lot of people's sort of day-to-day thinking or the people who were coming to their Thanksgiving table until now on the election. And so the question then becomes, what do we do to sort of A, understand that the spaces we thought were our spaces that were effective might not be, and B, do we need to have to build our own sandbox? Is that the answer, or is it just we need to lean further into the people who are actually effective at reaching most people where they are most days, which is not the New York Times app, although it's one of my destinations. So I'll pause there because I rambled a bit.
No, I mean, I think you're right. And I think the thing that people tend to forget is that this isn't something that just happened, right? Like, this has been something that has been, as you said, going on since the dawn of Fox News. I mean, I would argue that that was really the beginning of it, because then Fox pulled a lot of those AM radio guys, Rush Limbaugh being one of them, and there's a whole host, Hannity, like all of these guys. All of a sudden, they're not only on the radio in the morning or in the midday, they're also on in the evening too. And then from that, we saw the rise of, the Ben Shapiro's and things like that, podcasters, Tim Pool, right?
Not to interrupt you, Tim, but like Alex Jones, a lot of people don't, Alex Jones was an AM radio host for a successful one. And Rush Limbaugh used AM radio, was primarily used for evangelical broadcasts for like 2 generations. And so It was easy when the rise of the right sort of co-aligned itself with the Christian right. They were like, well, we might as well use AM radio because our audience is already kind of built in there. So it is a little bit of a strange American anomaly, but I just wanted to make sure that people understand that AM radio has been feeding the conservative ecosystem, like you said, Josh, forever. Go ahead, Tim, sorry.
You can go back to like Barry Goldwater. Yeah, I mean.
And sure. the Democratic's attempts, or liberals, I guess I should say, has really just been to mimic that in the reverse, which just frankly has not worked. So there has been decades of Republicans building this, and Democrats have sort of, as you said, Josh, relied on traditional media to get that message out and kind of hold the right accountable. Now that is also a breaking model as well. So now here we are. We've been almost 2 months since, actually maybe it is 2 months to the day, since the election, or close to it. You guys announced something really interesting in December, which had a fair amount of fanfare, at least on TikTok. I saw people talking about it quite a lot. And there's obviously been a lot of interest in something called Chorus, that is meant to help address some of this. So, Josh, could you walk us through sort of what Chorus is and how it came to be?
Yeah, absolutely. So, taking a half step back and sort of how we got here. So, from my perch at Good Influence, we worked with 100 organizations this past year, candidates, the director of the Harris campaign, statewide, outside groups, all sorts of folks. And we're not the only ones who sort of had similar experiences. Ashwath, one of the founders of Social Current, shared some really great data from their firm that sort of, there's this great chart. We have a similar one. It's a little bit different on our side, but where it was spending by month with influencers. And basically it was a fairly steady line, and then it spikes massively in September and October. And if you're thinking about campaign spending and how do you reach voters on TV, that makes sense. You buy ads late, like, sure, we all understand that idea. And I think, we're spending every day working with organizations who know that they need to engage with influencers. And some of them understand exactly why, I think in the same way we do. And others know they want to do it, but they have it sort of line itemed into one specific part of what they're doing in a cycle. Everyone's learning in real time. That's totally fair. I think the big takeaway we had, sort of A, seeing how organizations approach the cycle, and B, how we just interact with the influencers that we work with. So, we're working really, really closely with folks who in any other time period before social media wouldn't be influencers. They probably would be MSNBC hosts. They could be AM radio hosts. They could be voices in culture in other settings. You can compare folks to anything. Some of our people are really great at explaining what's going on in the world in a perspective with trust to an audience that understands who they are. So, there's a reason for a long time you would watch one specific show on TV is because you trusted that host. And even when it was as simple as our parents or grandparents and all they had were 3 evening news programs and it's like 3 nearly identical people telling you the news, you still picked one because you like them a little bit more. And so that is the relationship that our creator partners have with their audiences. They're the voice. You might not follow 100 of them, you don't need to, but you follow one or two and they're the people you work with. So this cycle, we saw folks who knew they needed to work with influencers because it was a way to reach people, but what they weren't necessarily understanding was, if you are good at what you do with your audience as a creator, you're talking to your audience every day, several times a day. And so the way to engage as a candidate, as an outside organization, as someone representing an issue that you're trying to bring to the fold, is not a one-off in September and October, but it's constant engagement throughout the year, and ideally multiple years. So there were organizations that we talked to in 2023, and we said, the best thing you could do, hands down, is let's find you a group of creators who care passionately about this issue, and let's work with them to be a underwriter of their work, because that's how they can better integrate into your issue. You can give them the resources, you can connect them with people. And most organizations said, that's interesting. We don't have a line item for that. That's not how we've put together our media dollars. So coming out of this cycle, as soon as the election was over, we all saw every thought piece that came out that basically said the same thing. The right did something genius. At Donald Trump's election night, they're shouting out YouTubers and podcasters. So something's going on. The narrative's set. And so in conversation, text messages, quick phone calls, just like the things that were happening in real time, every creator we worked with sort of said, we've been trying to tell people this the whole time. Why, what's next? And there was sort of this light bulb of, a lot of folks are going to write a memo that says what we should really do is find a way to support the people who are reaching our voters and potential voters in a more consistent way. And we should stop treating our roster of folks who could be as effective as anyone on the right or in the middle who's been brought over to the right. We treat them like gig workers because we haven't built a way for them to be consistently supported. So
I just want to jump in and say that is the most badass metaphor I've heard, and really stop treating them like gig workers it's magnificent. If people get nothing else from this episode today, I want them to take that home and put it under their pillow and sleep with it for 6 months. That is bonkers good. Sorry, continue, Josh. I apologize.
And again, we run an agency that works with a very specific type of influencer talent, but internally, whenever we're thinking about what can we do next, we're always trying to think of an answer to the question of how can we find another way to bring revenue to our creators. So we do a lot of traditional influencer work where it's organization wants people to know a thing, there's a transaction to have a creator create a video, but we also do a lot of work where we can subsidize creators for their talents in other ways, where they can help make a video that could be used for advertising, where they could we had a creator narrate a documentary for an organization because the organization recognized that creator super great relationship with their core audience. That would be a nice small way to impact their audience, show validity, and for the creator, it was an entire revenue stream they had never thought of. So we're always trying to find new ways to support them, but the reality is they truly are gig workers. If you ask, most influencers, how are you making money 2 weeks from now? They probably don't have a great answer the majority of the time. It's certainly not enough to call it a career that you would define as stable. So Chorus is an attempt to set up a structure that can support our most effective and up-and-coming voices who can impact culture and change for progressive values. And what that actually means is that we're looking to create an ecosystem of support from both real people on the ground, to you and me, to major funders, to outside group supporters, who can help build an infrastructure where we can provide stable salary and stipends to creators for a long amount of time so that they don't have to think, this isn't enough for me to create a living, so I'm going to just turn my voice off and go get a desk job or a retail job. And we have creators who sometimes can't do partnerships because they have to work at the Gap. That's crazy. And
not to cut you off, Josh, but that's a real problem on the left, right? This is a thing that happens over and over again. And I've talked to lots of folks, and we've talked offline, that a lot of creators, they just can't, we haven't been supporting them. And so they have nothing, and then they have to go get a job, or they're just like, this is too hard. Whereas the conservative side has been funding them for a long time. So yeah, I'm sorry, didn't mean to cut you off, but like it's just a really important point that this doesn't exist until Chorus, at least.
Right, and again, like this is the difference between the right and the left, and it's not a knock on us. It's just a different ecosystem and a different reason for existence. The right has had a structure going back to AM radio to mail-in society. Like there's a whole history lesson that's not worth having here about it. We've always had the opposite. I mean, I have so many. I'm sure we're all in this camp of folks who came up in blogging, from. Yep. Pick your favorite year, but that's how I came into this, back in, and they also, like, for the most part, couldn't muscle out a living. Some survived and moved on and became, Ezra Klein and whatever else. But like, it's a different thing now where that world, we still had cable news, we still had print media in a way that was impacting people day to day. Now we don't. So as our traditional media is just dying, we need to make sure that there's a support structure is similar to a publisher for any other traditional media. Yep. If you work at the Washington Post, which these days sounds terrible, you are a journalist there, but the benefits to you have an editor, you have a legal team to back you up, you have a fact checker, you have healthcare, right? Like, just hopefully, you have all these pieces that make it worthwhile for you to do those things. Now, if you are a creator, you don't need the brand of a publisher, but it'd be nice to have the support structure. Yeah. So Chorus is trying to address some of those things, and the things that we're going to do, because I'm a little all over the place, we are aiming to stand up a few things. One, a pretty large scale stipend and sort of ongoing support structure for impactful voices and up and coming voices. We launched with 17 creators who, this is all very organic. This is really driven by them. My partner Stuart and I and a few others are really just here to help structurally get it going. But the creators who came forward, so you have folks like Brian Tyler Cohen. He is fully self-sufficient. He does not need $1 from Chorus. He does not want $1 from Chorus. What he wants is to have a place where we can bring people together and coordinate messaging, just like Grover Norquist used to do with a morning meeting. On the other side, Brian wants to do that on our side. But we also have creators who, frankly, on the first call, I side texted someone and said, "Who is this person?" And they said, "Oh, you'll know them very soon. They're going to explode." And one of the creators wanted to make sure they're in this. And so we're bringing big and small together. Good Influence, we manage an app for creators with 800 plus creators who are sort of all potentially people we could engage with Chorus. And we've said to them, you will all be invited to this in some way soon. We just don't want to overpromise and underdeliver. So as we're scaling it up, we're doing it with some initial folks who sort of fully understand we're all building this together. We're all trying to do this to get it off the ground. So we're starting with support structures and then eventually with shared resources from editors to legal support to hopefully benefits and some other pieces that just are all the things that, again, if you were a traditional journalist in any other setting, there's some sort of publisher model where in this space, the platforms, Meta, TikTok, whoever, they don't provide any of that. They have no incentive to. So we have to build it ourselves.
Can I ask a quick question? Sorry, Tim, do you mind if I jump in real quick before we move away from this? So one thing that always occurs to me, and I'm not trying to play devil's advocate per se, but it is going to maybe come off a little bit that way, Josh. And I'm asking because I think when I have people in front of me like you always are more likely to provide a better answer and a more honest one than somebody who's, say, involved in pure play politics, where they have to kind of dodge this question. So one advantage that the right has, and this is true for their ecosystem too of social networks, because like their social networks can go belly up and they'll have a billionaire that will write a check for them and bail them out. Twitter would not be in business anymore, or it would have been siphoned off and for parts, as we know by now, probably. So the right has people who are wealthy who don't want to pay taxes, and that is what funds their ecosystem primarily. Or they don't want to face sort of regulatory issues, whether it's fossil fuel companies or people that don't want to deal with like Medicare for all, things like that. Everybody knows who's listening to this. So what motivates these funding resources sort of to the sort of center left and then far left, and where does that money come from, and how do we keep that going? Because I always feel like that is where the fork in the road really splits these two sides off in a major way that's very challenging to deal with.
Yeah. Yes. Can I just start there? No, I mean, so a couple things on this. When we launched Chorus, it was with, I'd say, a half dozen creators just posting videos that just said, this is what we're doing. This is why. And if you want to know more about it, we have a very basic website that we stood up. I mean, we landed on this idea 2 days after the election, and it was live less than 2 weeks later. So we're still moving very quickly. What happened, we got thousands of grassroots supporters who just came in. It was not a thing we had talked about. We set up an Act Blue page just because that's what you're supposed to do. But it was not a thing we were thinking about. So I think the takeaway we got from that was, in a non-predatory way, there is a way to find and bring in supporters who can sustain us. I'm very shocked at the number of people who on day one committed with recurring donations. So we have like a small revenue stream off that we've only asked the one time. We haven't gone back to that well. And we don't want to rely purely on that. The second phase, which is beginning to happen, one of the things, I know, Tim, you're in this camp too. From the OFA days to the Indivisible days to folks who have organized in their local communities and then maintained some of those connections. We actually have had some groups in just towns across the country reach out and say, hey, we do Zoom fundraisers and we invite a lot of people and we actually raise like some real money. Can we help you? And so we're beginning to set up some of those, and I think that's sort of, one tier up from, my friend who said I literally donated $1, but that's what I'm giving you. But I just want you to know I support you. So I do think that there's levels of this that can be community driven in the same way the most successful new startups right now are very local and supported by their readership. I think there's a version of that can get us pretty far, because again, the difference between this and some of the ideas in these spaces of the past, we don't need to put in nearly as much money as I think people think to have a really impactful reach to a lot of people online. So I don't think we need to rely for hundreds of millions of dollars to make a cable network happen. We don't need that. We don't need all those things. We want some of it. We don't need all of it. And then the last piece, I think, is just beginning to happen, and the conversations are just slower because everyone's regrouping after the cycle. But I do think that there's folks who have invested a lot in and around some of these ideas that are coming to sort of the same understanding we are. So I think right now we're optimistic and maybe naively hopeful that some of that will come about. But I think anyone who is a democracy funder, anyone who cares about the long-term fight for specific issues, I would say what we're trying to do is not a 2-year solve. It's not a 4-year solve. It's not a cycle-specific thing. I think that's one of the flaws we've had in our investing, right, to date. But if you are someone who's looking at an issue at a union, at just any group, when you're thinking about where can I maximize my reach for the next decade, I think we want to be on that list. And I think that's the case that we're going to start to make. And the way that we plan to do it in the short term is with some moments online where we can convene large audiences by combining the reach of multiple creators together, creating a chorus. And I think that's the way we'll start to show that impact. So I don't have a great answer, except that I think we have to build a little to show it, improve the concept. But it's not that the money's there, and just a little behind the curtain math for you. I mean, pick your number of how much was spent on TV this cycle, just on our side. And this isn't a knock on TV buyers or the strategy.
Close to $1 billion.
No, it's $1.5 billion.
It's just expensive. It's expensive to buy TV ads everywhere.
Right.
I'm pretty positive. I feel good on these numbers for the entire creator space. I think the whole investment. I'd be shocked if it was more than 20, $25 million just across the board. So when we talk about is the money there,
right?
If we just take a rounding error adjustment to TV
People
budgets,
can make a living, right?
Yeah, like two TV buyers are going to put a hit out on me right now. But like if you just take a rounding error adjustment and move it to this concept, and again, the ROI we saw, I mean, this is a digital first space. We had campaigns that invested and orgs that invested in real creator programs where they're driving real messaging every day, every other day, every week. They were seeing CPMs for the reach that they were getting at large scale that were sub $10. So it's better than digital pre-roll in terms of reach. It's more authentic. And if you do it over the long term, you're building trust. So from an investment point of view, I actually think this is way better of a place to sink dollars into. People just got to give it a shot.
And I agree with you. That's why
I know this is a yes group. Yeah.
Well, no, but like I'll say that I want to give this back to Tim, but like I'll just say like one of the other problems that we've had kind of in the left in these sort of more traditional spaces is that I'm just going to say it like this. What is the average salary of a non-celebrity CNN anchor? Right? And I understand like so if you just take that money, that millions of dollars per year, and you think, well, okay, that was subsidized by this cable ecosystem and all these other like licensing fees and stuff. However, it was also subsidized by advertisers. So there are people who care about quality media and who will put money with someone who says, for a button on the bottom that says, this has been brought to you by whatever. And look, you guys can say that I sound like a cynical capitalist all you want. We can do that on another podcast. That's fine. But like, that is how the whole world of journalism has always been subsidized by advertising. And I think that we are at I hope an inflection point where those advertisers are going to be like, well, if my people aren't on CNN anymore, which they're not, and if they're not watching cable news, then they're not, and I don't want to just throw some random ad on whatever break roll thing that they have on Netflix now because their advertising experience is terrible. Mm-hmm. I would like something good. So I do think this is like a really valid conversation to be having.
Well, let me give some for some of the people that are listening and they're maybe not as familiar with this space. The influencers that Josh is talking to regularly get multiples of views more than cable news. I mean, I'll give you a silly example of me, and I'm not trying to, well, I'm going to pat myself on the back a little bit for this, but I posted a TikTok, I think on Friday, about the fact that Costco was under a lot of pressure to get rid of their DEI programs from the right. They have basically said, screw off. This is part of our core values, and we're not getting rid of it. There's also plenty of data that shows that companies that have DEI programs drive more revenue because they have a diversity of thought. But anyways, that's a conversation for another day. But anyways, I did this video and I said, they basically told conservatives no. And that video has been seen 1.1 million times. It took me 2 or 3 minutes to put that together and send it out. And I've got, 49K on TikTok, which is really good. But like Brian, who you work with, is like, can multiply that 1,000 times over. And like you said, like, I think the thing is like this content that is being developed by these folks is far more authentic towards those particular audiences, because those influencers know if they start selling crap that nobody wants, those people are gone. So, and like you said, like I even said, I think the Harris campaign spent like 1.4 billion on TV ads, and I'm not knocking that because she had 3 months and they were in a huge hole, and I don't think I wouldn't probably have done much different either. But we do need to start this now, but it is far cheaper. But we have to, these organizations, and it's not just political campaigns, it's nonprofit organizations and businesses too, to be perfectly honest. Like I ran an influencer program at WeWork that was 3-to-1 ROI positive, like just having influencers going into space for like 3 months and bartering and it worked. But we have to change the budgeting cycles because everyone dials down. in the off years, right? Because then they gear up because they know they're going to have to spend big in the last 6 months, and in particular for the 3 months. But this is actually a much better model. But I think, the challenge, I think, and Josh, I think this is why I am so happy to see Chorus, is that it is very difficult for groups to go, okay, well, where do I go? Like, how do I do this? So I'm curious, I know you guys got a lot, I know you got a lot of like influencers or people who want to be influencers writing you saying, I want in, because I totally get it. But have you seen interest from groups as well, wanting to tap into these resources, or is it still a little too early? I'm curious how that's gone so far.
Look, I think we have been, it's done what we've wanted it to do, which if you're one of the creators in the group, I think they would all tell you they have really great ideas for how to make a big impact, and they've all struggled as individuals to pitch that to an organization. So even if you're the best creator, you're still one voice, one channel, or one set of channels. It's not the most convincing upsell to a large organization who's, spending $1.4 billion, and they're like, and you need how much? But that's going to be a big impact. It's just hard to conceptualize, and I totally get it. So when we can come together as a collective and say, this is a way that you can leverage at scale a whole bunch of impactful voices for organizations who are trying to plan long term, it's so much easier to sort of mentally, I think, be able to say, oh, we have a large scale partner that is made up entirely of what we want. And look, I run an agency. There's 100% a need and a place for talent managers, for agencies still in this space. A lot of organizations still need sort of one-off moments of support. We just did an exhausting run of end of year fundraising campaigns for organizations. Like, those are clear moments where a fundraising team would like to engage an influencer. They do not need Chorus for that. Chorus is a long-term thing. But if you're an organization who wants to have a long-term plan, an agency model isn't necessarily the right solve for that, or it's just too many hands, in the meeting, too many faces in the meeting. And I'm not trying to shoot my own business in the foot here, but we think there's like two different things here. What we want to be able to do is open up the editorial side of creators at scale to more collaborative partnerships. And if you talk to comms people, they say, we know we need to pitch creators. We just can't figure out how the heck it works. And the idea of like, if you're a comms person, you can go pitch an editor. And then an editor will figure out who to give it the story to. And it's a much more streamlined effort. If on the creator side, it's like, so I got to pitch like 45 different creators. They all have totally different formats, and I have no idea one-to-one because there's not a good melt water, or some analytics thing that I can sort of understand this well from a comms perspective. So to be able to go to them and say, you have an idea, come to us. We will take this to the group. We can bring you a solution that makes sense. It's editorial driven because the creators are looking for these opportunities. So we have an email chain going today about some stuff around the anniversary of January 6th, the last one, and that is entirely going to be coming together because we're able to centralize creators in one place. And so the organizations are I think, thrilled about that part of it. And then I think it's also just a much easier way to engage thought partners, for organizations who are trying to understand this space. So instead of trying to find some random creator who their cousin knows to come talk to them, we can hopefully open up more of those opportunities. So we've done a few small things there.
Can I do a little bit of bragging for you about why that's special, just for a second, or at least
I'll
say burgeoning. So there are creator agencies. So for people who are listening to this, and they're like, there are totally creator agencies. Like, yes, there are. But those types of creators typically are in more consumer channels. So health, sorry, I just threw up a little bit, wellness, food, influencers are huge, obviously, lifestyle brand, that kind of thing. And yes, those kinds of creators, there are a lot of agencies that specialize in those kind of creators. What's been neglected, and what I think what makes what Chorus is doing so important and so unusual, I don't know, I don't know if it's unique necessarily, but certainly like fairly new, that it's not happened in politics. That I think is what's really remarkable about it, is that people don't like news. Platforms don't like news. Social, like, nobody wants to do, YouTube doesn't want to deal with news. And so having what you need is sort of a critical mass, right, of eyeballs and creators, so that you have some leverage, so that, like, Brian is a great example because his channel's so massive, YouTube can't, you know, whatever, like they can't sort of like deflate it. Basically, they can't sort of shove it down in the algorithm because he has so many views. It's too much money for them. I had one quick question, then I'll throw it over to Tim and he can close us out. So when I think about one of the problems that I see right now with influencers and platforms is that platforms really dictate when and how an ad interrupts the sort of the actual content itself. Do you think there's a possibility where you would look at doing something a bit more bespoke for your video feeds, so that you have a little more control of it? So in other words, so you're not just like sort of like throwing it out there on YouTube and that YouTube is going to come in, so that you can actually say like, no, we have ad breaks. We have proper normal ad breaks like you do on an audio podcast. And your video is that something that you guys have been thinking about, or is it just way too early in the cycle?
No, it's one of the core things that we, I think, from the creator to creator side of this, which is really all of it, has come up a lot. So I would say the majority of the creators from the Good Influence side that we work with, and definitely for Chorus, it's one of the things that we're really focused on. Majority of the creators that we work with are multi-platform. So if you're a good YouTuber, you're also other places. If you're on TikTok, you're at least on Instagram, right? We're super interested in helping creators who are isolated to one or two platforms because they just don't. Being good at YouTube takes a lot of work, and you need to do longer formats to really break through. And that's also where the revenue is, right? The revenue comes from those awkward ad breaks. And so the longer your video is, the more you're monetizing because there's more ad breaks. I mean, it's just basic stuff that we all understand. But if you're a creator who started by just taking their phone out, to talk about the Costco DEI program while you're walking to work, to go from that to a podcast to a YouTube show, it takes more effort. And some people have those skills really organically. Some people are able to invest in themselves. But what we've found is there are people who have figured this out and they're really good at one platform and they can help someone get better at another platform. So we also have YouTubers who will very admittedly tell you they stink at TikTok and Instagram. And honestly, the thing that they need most is just an editor who can take their great YouTube video and chop it in a much better way. So we're super interested in helping creators scale up. And then for those who have dipped their toes in, there's other creators who are just really great at growth tactics and really understand that piece of it. So there's that. But then to your real question, Chorus as an organization does not plan to be a brand forward group when it comes to the viewer experience. So if you're watching someone on TikTok who works with Chorus, they don't need to talk about Chorus. There's nothing interesting about Chorus. Chorus is just a way to help support them. This is a very fragmented concept. In that way, it's very distributed. However, there's a group of platforms and places where there's still value in a network. So if you think about, I don't know if you have a smart TV, but if you have a Samsung or LG or whatever, you turn it on and there's like a fake version of what cable used to be in terms of channels, and they're all just fast streaming channels, right? There's I watch the America's Test Kitchen one, which turns on every time I turn on my TV. We want to bring some of this content to places like that where you do need a centralized brand, but you also, to your point, control the ad flow. And I think that's a place where we also see a huge opportunity for organizations who want to invest in their own content creation, which is a very logical and smart thing that they should be doing. They're creating it. A lot of the work, I think, as a movement we did this cycle, lots of people made really good stuff. The thing that is challenging is if you're relying on organic reach,
right? How
far is it going? And so even just building a better apparatus to share content more consistently, I think is something we're super excited about. Twitch is like that too. There's places where we can do better programming together and have a lot more control. But it also, to your other question, there's a huge opportunity there to bring sustainability to the monetization for the resources to support people. If we can bring it together, you suddenly are opening up much better revenue streams on YouTube for more creators and things like that we can share back, in addition to advertising opportunities and data. I think the platforms hog data in a way that we'd like to disrupt. So we're not trying to do everything in grand visions, but I do think if you just put the pieces together, it opens up doors that no one individual creator can do and no one organization can do. We just need a bigger tent set up for this purpose.
Interesting.
I totally agree. I am super excited about this. I'm glad that you guys are you're doing this and that it is out there. I think as a wrap up, Josh, how can people get involved or get in touch with you guys? I mean, I know you've been inundated, so people just be patient as they're building this. What's the best way for people to learn more about Chorus?
Yeah, absolutely. We have a great website, wearechorus.com. Where you can sign up to get emails from us, which we are just sort of beginning to stand up. We also are very happy to share hello at wearechorus.com. Just shoot us an email. We've gotten some great inbound from folks with ideas along the way. We will have a few moments in January that I think will be pretty omnipresent. So if you go to the site now and just share your email, you'll be aware of those. And then we're on basically every social platform, usually with We Are Chorus as our handle. I think we're heading towards 100,000 followers across platforms despite having no content. So there's, the big surprises coming there. I think those are the big things. But We Are Chorus in most places is how you can find us. And we're super excited to hopefully be more visible in the coming days and weeks.
Great. Well, Josh, I'm excited about this. I think there's really big things ahead. So thank you for taking the lead on this. And thank you, Josh, for joining us today. We'll probably have to have you back here in a few months to see how things are going and talk about this some more, because I honestly think this is the number one topic from a tactical perspective that Democrats should be doing right now, something different. And I think we have to start investing now, which is why I'm glad you're already out there. So everybody go to wearechorus.com. Thank you, Josh. Thank you, everybody, for listening to PolitiGood. I'm Tim Fullerton.
Oh, and I'm Rachel Parker. Was I supposed to say that? Sorry.
I screwed that up. Anyways, that's a good one. I know. I try to do a little fun thing, and I thought,
How dare you be spontaneous, sir? Anyway, how dare you?
Thanks, everybody. We'll talk soon.
Thanks,
Take care.
Josh. Today's episode was produced by Rachel Parker and Tim Fullerton. Audio, music, and engineering by Chris Lombardo. Our assistant producer is Lizette Nolasco. Find us wherever you listen to podcasts and watch entire episodes on our YouTube channel. Sign up for premium content and more at politigoodpod.com or email us at hello@politigoodpod.com.